we touched on this a little bit last week, JT, but we probably need to keep hitting it. If you're going to hunt WMAs for turkey this year, be sure to check those regulations, because we have a subset of WMAs that will not open until April the 1st. We had an article in the Clarion Ledger this past weekend where Brian Broom and I spoke a little bit about this. So really that framework change was to address some long-term declines and try to shift the harvest a little bit later into the breeding season. But those WMAs are Choctaw, Malmason, Mason Creek, Little Biloxi, and Marion County WMA. So if you are used to hunting on any of those 5, Choctaw, Malmason, Mason Creek, Little Biloxi, or Marion County, be advised that the season will not open until April the 1st. So we want to get that word out there. And then, Chris and I both have been getting a lot of questions about turkey harvest reporting and supplemental feeding. So you are going to have to report your turkeys this year. We're going to have a lot more coming out over the next couple of weeks on all of that. And then the supplemental feeding, a lot of folks are confused, right, Chris? They're confused on what they can do during turkey season. And
and so there was an amendment made to the rule, and then it was taken back and changed. And so people are it's kind of cloudy what the final ruling is on that. But so basically, just to be safe, there's state statute that prohibits hunting turkeys with the ADA bait, and the 100-yard restriction was removed this hunting season. That pertains to deer. That goes towards deer. Nothing in that 100-yard restriction allows
statutes. The Mississippi Code treats turkeys totally different than it treats deer in this regard.
We go back to our basic economics classes, and so the 100-yard deal was for deer. It doesn't allow people to sit 20 yards from a feeder and shoot turkeys coming to that feeder, where they can do that for a deer. There's no distance requirements. And so we're just trying to clarify some of that so people, have a good time hunting and they don't, I didn't know, I'm sorry. And so we want to try to nip that on the front end.
All right, question for you.
Right.
A lot of people have feeders in their food plots. Can the feeder be empty, or do they need to pick the feeder up?
No, a feeder can stay there. They can continue to feed through the season. And this is where it gets gray. Because people are wanting to feed their deer and continue that process of getting the antlers big for next fall, which is awesome and great. But if it's got corn in there, if it's got like soybeans, or if it's got a grain product in that feeder and it's spreading it out in that food plot, and you're sitting there and there's a turkey coming to it, then that's an issue that could be a violation of hunting turkeys over the ADA bait.
What about if it's protein?
Is this protein? I'm unaware of turkeys eating protein pellets. I guess
I've seen them eat, but obviously they're not going to prefer it.
Habitat and Predator Management Month. We're going to cover topics that you can implement to improve your game population. We're going to talk more about the habitat today, and of course, mostly one of the most important things you can do is prescribe burning. So let's talk about that. It sounds like, Adam, you did a little habitat management this weekend.
I did
chatting it up there.
I did a little bit of burning myself with my 82-year-old grandfather on the old home place.
Oh, really?
Back in Lawrence County. Yeah. He's a pyromaniac. He absolutely loves to burn the woods.
This is different than the other. This is your grandfather?
Yeah.
He's not your wife's.
No. Yeah.
We were talking to. He's got another grandfather who's 90 something.
Well, that's my wife's papa. Is 96, I believe.
Still was an avid turkey hunter back way back.
So, how much land did you burn?
I think we did a little over 100 acres probably of some longleaf. So it's always
just a little over 100 acres.
A little over 100 acres. Well, it's a full day, man. It's a full day.
Well, I would guess so.
Yeah, but he had planted some longleaf pine. I guess it's 10 years old now, 11 years old. Which longleaf, again, that part of the decision-making process there is sort of the habitat that goes along with longleaf, and you really have to burn longleaf pretty frequently. So we've been burning that stand about every other year since it's been planted, so I got to do some of that. Burning is one of my absolute favorite things, JT. I love it. love prescribed burning.
So what is why is it such a good practice? Tell me why, what it does.
Well, you got to understand that most of the Southeast, historically burned a lot. And if depending on who you listen to or read, there's some thought that historically a lot of fire was caused by lightning strikes. If we were to go way back, so lightning would hit a tree and it'd set the woods on fire, and there was nobody to stop it. It would just burn the landscape. Some people believe that was more because the Native Americans who were here kind of realized that, hey, burning is a good thing, and so they would burn off the woods to sort of draw in game to where they were hunting. But at any rate, most of the Southeast has been burned for tens of thousands of years, and so a lot of the plant communities that we have here are really well adapted to it. So what prescribed burning does is it sort of sets back the understory. So if you're doing it in, say, a forested stand, it's going to kind of get rid of some of the brush, which is what we were trying to get rid of. A lot of the plants that make it hard to kind of walk through the woods, it's going to get rid of them, and it's going to encourage better plants that are better for wildlife. So plants that maybe, if you're a deer person, have better browse quality or more palatable. For my turkeys and my quail, it's going to be better brood habitat, better nesting cover. And it also recycles nutrients back in the soil. So there's like a whole chemistry process that goes along. So in the end, you end up with a timber stand, if you're burning it regularly, that's going to look completely different from what a lot of our landscape today looks like, and is going to be better for a lot of wildlife, including deer and turkeys and quail and such.
Probably
as that.
Sounds like something I need to do, since we just thinned our place and did that and had some fire lanes put in.
Right. So after a thin is a really good time to start a prescribed burn program. Now, if you just recently had it thinned, probably need to maybe wait a year or so, let a lot of that log and slash and stuff kind of decay down, because if you were to burn it relatively soon after the thinning, that stuff's going to get really, really hot and could potentially damage the trees that are left. So you kind of want to give it at least a year, let that stuff sort of decay down a little bit.
I got you.
And then, start a prescribed burn program.
Now, you're not just talking about setting off a fire. You have to control this, and it's something that you obviously have taken and gotten the experience and the training to do this.
So my 5-year-old asked me Friday night what we were doing tomorrow, and I said, well, I got to go down and visit with Papa Jack. We're going to burn the woods. And his eyes got really, when I said burn the woods, his eyes got really big, and he said, you're going to burn the trees up? And so I tried to explain to him, no, we're not burning, everything down. We're going to do it really in a controlled way and for a specific reason. But you're right, JT. We're not just willy-nilly striking matches and throwing them out. So if you're going to be conducting prescribed burns, it's best to rely on somebody with experience that's done it before. That means either you can hire somebody. Most forestry consultants will offer that as a service. The Mississippi Forestry Commission does as well. Or if you ultimately want to do it yourself, you need to kind of find someone who can help you along and help you figure that out. Maybe you want to hire somebody for the first few times until you get familiar with it, go through the certification course, and we can talk about that here in a minute, and get comfortable with it. But the whole setup, you've got basically fire lanes, which are strips of bare dirt that have been either pushed by a bulldozer or disc with a tractor or something, where the fire has no fuel to creep across, and so you're keeping it contained within a specific area. And then you're doing it under optimal weather conditions. You're really paying attention to what the air humidity is, what the wind is going to be doing, the direction of the wind, all these sort of things, so that you're being very, very safe and not going to have just some raging crazy forest fire.
You got to have a permit to burn, right?
That's correct. So a lot of people kind of misunderstand the purpose of the permit. So Saturday when we did the burn, we called the Mississippi Forestry Commission.
Right.
And we told them what we were planning on doing, and they asked us a few questions. Where are you burning? What's the intent? How many acres? All these sort of things. And then they say, okay, your permit number, whatever, and you can burn up until a certain point during the day. And so in Mississippi, you technically don't have to do that, but it is in your best interest to do that. So in other words, if you don't have a burn permit from the Forestry Commission, there's nobody going to come and write you a ticket or something like that. But it is in your interest to get that, because it serves as a partial protection and liability for something to go wrong. So there's actually a legislative act that governs kind of prescribed burning, the law around prescribed burning, and it says that prescribed burning is a right that a landowner has in Mississippi. So you have a right to burn your place whenever you want to. But if you're smart and making sure you're doing everything properly,
crossing your T's and dotting
crossing
your
your T's. We live in a litigious society where people can get sued for a lot of things. So you really want to do everything right to make sure that you're protecting yourself from a legal standpoint. And so that Prescribed Burn Act of 1992 talks about that. And it talks about how no property owner conducting a prescribed burn and following these 4 requirements shall be liable for damage or injury caused by a fire resulting in smoke unless negligence is proven. So if you've done sort of 4 things, you have to be proven negligent for liability to fall back on you. Those 4 things are: 1, the burn has to be in a public interest. And so, if you're burning to improve wildlife habitat or you're burning to reduce fuel hazards for the case of wildfire, those are going to be things that are in the public interest. You have to have a certified prescribed burn manager overseeing the burn. So that's someone who has gone through the certification course that the Forestry Commission puts on and has been a certified burn manager.
Is that something you are?
I am.
Okay.
I've been through the course.
So I can bring you with me. I'll have you with me when we get
I've
ready
been
to
through
do
the
burn.
course.
Check.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. You have
Come on,
to
Adam.
have.
We got something we got to do today.
You've got to have a burn plan in place that has been notarized by a notary public before the day of the burn. And so that burn plan basically spells out everything you're going to do. It spells out where you're burning, why you're burning. It spells out the type of fuel you're burning, and it basically talks about where the smoke's going to go. So if I burn, this block on a north wind, my smoke's going to go this way, and I know that there's no kind of hazards downwind of me. And then on the day of, you have to call the Forestry Commission and get the burn permit. And it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's called a burn permit, but it should really be called a smoke permit, because basically what they're looking at are the weather conditions to say, hey, okay, if this guy is burning here, is the atmospheric conditions today conducive for that smoke to go up really, really high and disperse and disperse as it goes downwind. So they're kind of looking at a combination of the height at which the smoke's going to rise in the atmosphere and then the wind speed that's going to disperse that smoke. Because really, the fire itself is only one part of the equation. That smoke can cause a lot of issues.
If any people have ever went through the Delta in the fall when farmers are burning their fields, there's been accidents occurred because the smoke is so heavy and it gets out of hand, you can't see.
That's right. And so that's something really important to think about, because you can control that fire at the point that you're igniting it, but that smoke's going to be going for a pretty long ways downwind. And so if it were to smoke in a highway, cause an accident, that's potential liability that can fall back on you. If it were to smoke in a chicken house, cause chickens to die, nursing home, there's all sorts of issues. So you got to think about that. But a burn plan will have spelled those things out, and that's part of the process of doing your due diligence.
Yeah.
Adam, I know you're a turkey guy, and I always hear from people that get really, really upset because some public lands are burned during the turkey nesting season, and I guess people are worried about little poults getting burned up or eggs or things like that.
They are. We hear about it every year. So to kind of frame, I guess, this question up, most prescribed burning is kind of done at this time of the year, JT. So most of it's happening in the late winter or the very early spring. February is a big month for prescribed burning, early March. So you're talking about before leaves get out,
Right.
And there's a reason for that. This time of the year, one, it's you can get the conditions to burn a little bit better. If we get a couple of days after a cold front, it's a good time to do it. And it's kind of the traditional time people do a lot of burning. But if you go way, way back, like the historical, if we were to go back 500 years in time, a lot of the burning that happened across the southeast occurred during what we would call the growing season. So after things had leafed out, early summertime when we're getting a lot of those thunder showers that kind of roll through like we do that time of the year, that caused a lot of fires. And so some areas, for a lot of reasons, try to manage to mimic kind of the natural processes. So there's a whole bunch of research that shows that burning during that time of the year, during, say, May or June, creates different vegetative conditions, creates different plants and stuff out on the landscape than if you were to burn it this time of year. So the whole plant community responds differently depending on what time of the year you burn. And so there's some benefit to doing that. If you're worried about controlling sweet gum or some other woody stuff that you may not want in your pine stand, you actually get a better kill if you wait till that stuff is leafed out, so more into the growing season. But the trouble comes in that there's a lot of species, turkeys, that are nesting during that time of the year. So when people, pull up to the gate at their favorite national forest to go turkey hunting, and that they see that, it's all been burned, especially kind of later into April after the turkeys have been nesting, they get really upset. And so we hear that a lot every year. And JT, you know me, I'm a pretty serious turkey hunter myself, and actually do turkey hunt on some national forest stuff. I'm not going to tell you where, but I got a couple little favorite spots on some national forest areas. And from my point of view, when I take kind of my hunter hat off and put my biologist hat on, I've never seen any evidence from actual studies of turkeys wearing radio collars that has led me to believe that burning during that time of the year is detrimental at a population scale. Now, certainly there's a chance that you could burn a nest up if you're burning in late April on a national forest. But, as a biologist, we don't think about the individual animal. We think about the population as a whole. And there's just nothing I've seen that leads me to believe it's a population level issue. I'll quote a couple of studies. We actually looked at this specifically here in Mississippi back in the early 2000s on the Homachita National Forest, an area that was getting burned during the turkey nesting time of the year. And out of 65 nests that were monitored, only one got lost to fire. Similar study fairly recently on Fort Bragg, where they do a lot of burning during the growing season. Less than 3% of nests lost to growing season fire. On some quail management areas in Georgia, 4%. And over in Arkansas in the Ozark National Forest, out of 60 nests, 0 were lost to April burning. So you look at across all of these different studies that are from different places in the southeast, and I've just never seen anything that led me to believe, okay, that's going to be the death knell to the turkey population in that area. There is a little bit of science suggesting that, like, the scale of the burn, so burning really, really large blocks may not be a good thing because you lose sort of the inherent diversity, habitat diversity. And we got some science coming out that hopefully will dictate policy there. But just the simple notion of burning the woods during the turkey nesting time, I'm just not convinced that that's an issue. I've not seen any kind of science that would lead me to believe that's
Kyle
an issue.
in Silver Bay said, why does the burn during turkey nesting season? Why does that have to happen then? And we just, of course, did that.
Sure. Well, part of it is like I said, there are some actual, ecological benefits to it, that you get different plant response if you're burning at that time of year. And then the other part of it is simply, there's only so many days with good burn weather in, February and March. And that if you want to get a lot of acres done in a year, sometimes you got to go beyond that. And actually early May really oftentimes has really, really good weather conditions for burning that you get for most of that first half of May is really good time. So.
Some folks are asking too, and I was going to try to walk them through this. Someone says my MDWFP app doesn't show the turkey reporting option.
Sure. So,
I've deleted and reopened it several times.
Right. And we're that app, if you already have the MDWFP hunting and fishing app, this Friday, I think is the 15th, Friday's the 15th. The 15th, a new updated version is supposed to be pushed out. If you have your phone, you got to check and make sure you've got your phone set to automatic updates. So on the 15th, it should automatically update, and that game check feature will be there after that. I don't know what time of the day that'll happen, but the rollout is supposed to be on the 15th. And so, if you don't see it by next Monday, call back in on the show and we'll get that figured out. But it's supposed to be there in the next version as it comes out.
Man, I was just sitting here looking at the fishing reports everywhere. I mean, it's amazing what you can do with this thing, just playing with it here today. It's amazing little thing that you can check it out.
You can purchase your license on there, all sorts of stuff.
That's right. So make sure you check it out. All right, a couple of minutes. So if someone just gets more info on prescribed burning, or they want to start their own burn program, what do they need to do? Where do they go to get help?
So within MDWFP, we have a private lands program. These are folks who work exclusively with private landowners to help guide them to whatever objectives that they have and come up with an idea for that. So if you contact us, we can send one of those guys out and they can help you walk through that. The Mississippi Forestry Commission is also a great resource. They're sort of the legal stewards of prescribed burning in the state, and so they can help you out there. And then there's a lot of different, because prescribed burning is so important sort of to wildlife and to a lot of different things that are in the best interest of the public. There's a lot of different cost share options out there available where you can get funding to help offset the cost of implementing burning. We have a program called Fire on the 40 that does that, JT. And then there's other entities like the NRCS or the FSA. If you have CRP pines, there's options for doing that. So kind of check on those groups. And then you can get certified yourself. Again, the certification course sort of gives you all the classroom knowledge you would need to know to be a prescribed burner. You still probably ought to try to go get some experience somehow beyond that. But the Forestry Commission are the ones that handle the certification course. They generally have 2 or 3 a year. I looked before we came over here. They've got one coming up March the 5th through the 7th in Hattiesburg. I have no idea if that class has been filled or not. And then there's going to be another one a little bit later in the summer in June in Pearl. So anybody can sign up for those. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be a forester. You don't have to, you can just be average guy who wants to go out, guy or gal who wants to learn how to prescribe burn. You can sign up for those, get certified, and then, hopefully get some experience somewhere and be able to do it on your own.
David is in Oak Grove. David, you got a question for us. What you got, sir?
Just wanted to make a comment. I've used prescribed burning on my pine tree farm in Simpson County and gone through the course and got the prescribed burn manager, and really a great program. But I had a question. You never see any of these lands owned by big timber companies. Let's just take, for example, Weyerhaeuser and Plum Creek, for example. They don't, you never see them burn. They just do herbicide applications. Has anyone from Wildlife Fisheries and Parks or the Forest Commission ever approached some of the higher-ups at that company to say, hey, is there a reason that you're not burning, or could we get you started back on a burning program? Because I know there's just, hundreds of thousands of acres that these big timber companies don't ever set a match to.
Sure, David, and that's a good question. We've spoken with them at times about burning on specific tracts that they have in South Mississippi for certain things, and they do a little bit on a couple of mitigation type tracts. But you got to understand, their objectives are not necessarily the same objectives of the Wildlife and Fisheries and Parks agency. In most cases, they're holding that land to grow timber, to make return on investment with timber production, and prescribed burning can be used to reduce competition in a pine stand. So if you're growing pine trees, you can burn, and it sort of takes away all the competing plants, and that's historically been one of the uses for that. But today we have herbicides that are very selective and that can sort of accomplish that same goal without going down the potential liability road that you do with prescribed burning, or quite honestly, the manpower that's involved in prescribed burning. So it's a lot quicker and more efficient if your objective is solely to reduce competition within a pine stand. You can accomplish that with herbicides a lot quicker and more easily than you can with prescribed burning. Now, the flip side of that is the herbicides alone do not really provide the same wildlife benefit that the burn would. But again, that goes back to sort of what objectives are. The objectives of a timber company may not necessarily be the objectives of a wildlife agency, or there's some overlap there, but obviously not exactly the same thing. So that's probably why they do what they do.
All right, David, thank you, man. Appreciate you calling. Someone else out there asking the question, can I just hire somebody to come in and do this and get all the liability and everything off of me?
That's absolutely right, JT. A lot of forestry consultants, so registered forester. A lot of those are going to offer prescribed burning as one of the services they do. So, check around with those, and they'll do that for you. They're experienced. They know what they're doing. They've been certified, and they've probably had a lot of years of experience applying prescribed fire, so they understand, all that needs to go into that management plan and all that needs to be thought of to get ready to do it and can do it. So, if you've never done any prescribed burning, that's certainly probably what you need to do to begin with. Get somebody who knows what they're doing out there.
Someone had asked, is it good to burn or select cut over? Same situation like I've got. You need to give it a little while.
Right. So if it's a pine stand or a timber stand that has been recently thinned, you do need to probably give it a little while. Let that log and slash that's on the ground have a little time to decay, and then start implementing and immediately afterward, you're not going to be able to get a good burn anyway, because there's probably not enough fuel to carry the fire. You got to let a little bit of time go by to get some pine needles on the ground and some grasses and some stuff like that that's going to be the fuel for the fire. So give it a little while.
Yeah, and also like you said, I mean, you got a lot of green stuff on the ground too, a lot of green wood that's not going to burn.
I tell you though, it's something about that smell. The next morning after the burn, like when you go outside first thing in the morning, and that smoky smell still kind of hanging around in the piney woods, man, I love it. It's like one of my favorite things.
All right, we got about a minute left. Reed, you got anything else out there on the law enforcement side?
I'm just overly impressed with Adam's knowledge of prescribed burning, and it just adds more tools to his belt.
He's got bona fides too.
Every day, I just continue to be amazed at his just knowledge of everything wildlife.
And he's bona fide when it comes to burning. He's got the certifications and everything.
As a kid, you follow your grandfather around doing it, and then one day you get the bona fides, the certifieds, and you say, we may not have been doing everything exactly right way back when, but
it worked.
It worked.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. All right, gentlemen, and it's so important, and not only to help with wildlife management, but to help prevent forest fires and different things like that.
Yeah, we didn't really stress that, but you're exactly right. An area that is getting prescribed burn has a lower chance of having a wildfire. So,
good point.